The day they laughed at him, he didn't say a word. He just stood there, 12 years old, holding a drawing he had spent 3 weeks making, while his classmates passed it around the room like it was a joke. Their laughter filled every corner of that tiny school. The teacher never stopped them. He folded the paper slowly, tucked it into his shirt pocket, and walked home alone. That night, he didn't cry. He sat at the edge of his bed, pulled out a broken pencil, the only one he owned, and he started drawing again. Nobody knew it then. Nobody could have guessed it. But that moment, that laughed at, was the beginning of something the world would one day stop to admire. This is Unstoppable Stories. And today, you'll discover how a boy with nothing but a pencil and a dream became proof that the thing they mock you for today may be the very thing that sets you free tomorrow. His name was Daniel. He grew up in a small, forgotten town where people worked with their hands and dreams were considered a luxury. His father fixed motorcycles. His mother washed other people's clothes. There were 4 children in that house and never quite enough food for all of them. Daniel was the quiet one, the strange one, the one who sat in the corner during lunch and drew pictures instead of playing football with the other boys. He drew everything. Faces of strangers, the cracked walls of his bedroom, the way light fell through broken shutters in the morning. He had no formal training, no expensive pencils, no art paper. He drew on the backs of old receipts, on cardboard, on the margins of textbooks he couldn't afford to replace. Art, for Daniel, wasn't a hobby. It was air. It was the one place in his life where nothing was broken, nothing was missing, and nothing could be taken from him. But the world around him had no patience for beauty. His father thought drawing was a waste of time. "You'll never feed a family with pictures," he said more than once. Not cruelly, but with the weight of a man who had learned that lesson himself, in ways Daniel didn't yet understand. At school, Daniel's drawings made him a target. Kids laughed at his second-hand shoes and his quiet manner. When they found out he wanted to be an artist in their town. The laughter got louder. One teacher told him, gently but firmly, "You're a smart boy. Focus on something real, Daniel." He always nodded. And then he went home and drew. By the time Daniel was 17, something had shifted, but not in the way he'd hoped. He had entered an art competition at the regional school fair. He had worked on his piece for 2 months, every night after dinner, every weekend morning before the house woke up. He used the last of his saved money to buy a proper It was the most expensive thing he had ever purchased. The day of the fair, he carried his drawing into that gym like it was made of glass. The judges were local businessmen, well-dressed, confident. They walked slowly down the line of entries, hands clasped behind their backs. They stopped at Daniel's piece. They looked at it, and then one of them said loud enough that Daniel could hear, "It's technically okay, but there's no formal training here." You can tell. They moved on. He didn't win. He didn't place. He didn't even receive an honorable mention. He took his drawing home and stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing. That was also the week his father lost his job at the garage. Rent was overdue. His younger sister needed medicine. His mother had stopped sleeping, her eyes hollowed out by worry. And Daniel looked at his sketch pad, his precious, expensive sketch pad, and he thought, maybe they're right. Maybe this was never meant for me. He put the pad under his bed. He didn't touch it for 6 months. Those 6 months were the quietest, grayest stretch of his life. He got a job at a warehouse, moved boxers, kept his eyes down, came home tired. He stopped drawing entirely. But something strange happened during that silence. He started noticing how miserable the quiet made him. Not just sad, hollow, like something essential had been switched off. He would pass a window and see the light hitting the glass a certain way, and his fingers would twitch, reaching for a pencil that wasn't there. You can silence a person, but you cannot silence what they were made for. Foule de kit. Would he let 6 gray months become a gray lifetime? One Tuesday morning, Daniel was moving boxers at the warehouse when a shipment arrived, a damaged box of art supplies being returned to a store. His manager told him to dispose of it. Inside were pencils, dozens of them, high quality, barely used. He held one in his hand. It was just a pencil, a thin piece of wood and graphite. Nothing magic about it, nothing special. But in that moment, Daniel made a decision. Not because an opportunity appeared, not because the universe sent him a sign, but because holding that pencil reminded him sharply, painfully, completely of who he actually was. That evening, he pulled a sketch pad from under his bed. He didn't make a plan. He didn't set a goal. He just sat down, put the pencil to paper, and drew. His hands were stiff at first. Clumsy 6 months of silence had made him rusty. The first drawing was terrible. He knew it. He drew another, then another. He made a decision that night that had nothing dramatic about it. No music played, no one cheered. He simply decided, quietly, privately, with no audience, that he would not let other people's limitations become his own. Would draw, not for competitions, not for judges, not for approval. He would draw because he was a person who draws, and that was enough of a reason. The next 2 years were not glamorous. Daniel kept his warehouse job. He woke at 5 in the morning and drew for an hour before his shift. He drew on lunch breaks. He drew on weekends. He filled sketchpad after sketchpad with faces, cities, textures, shadows. He started reading books on technique, books on light, books on artists he'd never heard of who had struggled in ways that felt identical to his own. He discovered that Vincent van Gogh was rejected by art dealers, that Frida Kahlo painted through physical pain that would have flattened most people, that every great creative life contained chapters that looked, from the outside, like complete failure. This did not solve his problems, but it made him feel less alone. He also, for the first time, began to share his work. Cautiously. Nervously. He posted a few drawings online, small things, studies of hands, a portrait of his mother, a sketch of the warehouse at dawn. The response was quiet at first. A few strangers liked his work. A handful left comments. Nothing dramatic, but something was building. And this is exactly why stories like these matter, and why they're told here on Unstoppable Stories. Because the building is invisible before it becomes undeniable. Daniel's growth happened in the dark, the way roots grow before flowers appear. No one watches the roots. Everyone wants to see the bloom. He kept growing in the dark. He took an online course, free, because he couldn't afford to pay. He saved 4 months to buy better materials. He failed constantly, privately, and without ceremony. A portrait would be wrong. A perspective would collapse. He'd start over. He learned something crucial during this time. That failure is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that you are still in the process. The only people who never fail are the ones who never try. 3 years after that night with the warehouse pencil, Daniel looked different, not on the outside. He still lived simply, still worked hard, still had more doubts than certainties on most days, but something had shifted in the way he carried himself. He had developed a style, unmistakably his. His portraits had a quality that was difficult to name. They captured not just how people looked, but how they felt. A quiet sadness in the eyes, a toughness in the jaw, something alive, despite the stillness of the page. People started noticing. A local gallery, small, nothing famous, offered him a wall. 1 wall, 6 pieces. He hung them on a Tuesday. By Friday, 3 had sold. His father came to see the show on the last day. He walked slowly around the room, studying each piece. He didn't say much. But before he left, he put his hand on Daniel's shoulder. Just once, briefly, and he nodded. Daniel had to turn away so his father wouldn't see his face. That nod meant more than any prize, any judge, any competition he had ever entered. Word travels in the way that real things travel slowly and then suddenly. A journalist wrote a short piece about Daniel's work. It was shared online, then shared again. Then a larger publication picked it up. His drawings began appearing in conversations he was never part of, in cities he had never visited, among people who had no idea how he'd grown up or what he'd survived. He received his first commission, then another, then an invitation to exhibit in another city entirely. He quit the warehouse job on a Thursday afternoon, shook his manager's hand, and walked out into the afternoon sun feeling something he could barely describe. Not triumph, exactly. More like arrival, like stepping into a room you had been walking toward for years without knowing it existed. The boy who was laughed at for his drawings was now being paid, well paid too, marketum. The judges who overlooked him at 17 had no idea what they had seen and dismissed. The classmates who passed his drawings around like a joke. Some of them reached out over the years. He was kind to all of them. He understood, by now, that people only mock what they cannot yet see. Here is what this story is not. It is not a promise that your dream will come true on a specific timeline. It is not a guarantee that hard work leads to fame or financial reward. Daniel's path took years of invisible effort, and his outcome, though remarkable, is not the only definition of success. Some people pour that same discipline and love into their craft and find quiet, meaningful lives that the world never writes about. That is not a lesser outcome. A life lived in alignment with what you love. Truly love is its own form of success. What this story is evidence. Evidence that the voice that tells you to stop is almost never right. Evidence that the people who laugh at your beginning cannot see your ending. Evidence that the pencil, the decision to pick it back up, changes everything. There is a lesson in the pencil. Not in the talent. Not in the outcome. In the act of picking it back up. Daniel did not succeed because he was exceptional. He succeeded because he refused quietly, stubbornly. We told Drama to accept that his life had been already decided by the people and circumstances around him. He picked up the pencil when there was no reason to believe it would matter. And that is the whole story. That is the entire secret, if you want to call it one. Your version of the pencil might be a notebook, a code editor, a recipe, a conversation you've been afraid to have, a business idea that people have already told you is foolish, a version of yourself you keep hiding because the world once laughed at it. Whatever it is, pick it up, not because success is guaranteed. Pick it up because you are a person who does that thing, and that is reason enough. Your current situation is not your final destination. The struggle you are in right now may be building something in you that you cannot yet see. The roots grow before the flower. The work happens in the dark before the world takes notice. Keep going. This is Unstoppable Stories, because every great success story begins the same way, in a quiet moment, when no one is watching, when it would be easy to stop, and someone decides not to. Now, I want to hear from you. What was the moment in this story that hit you hardest? Have you ever put down your pencil, your dream, your work, your passion, because the world made you feel like it wasn't worth carrying? And are you ready to pick it back up? Tell me in the comments. I read them, every one. And if this story reminded you that your struggle is not the end of your story, subscribe to Unstoppable Stories. Every week, we bring you journeys like Daniel's. Real people, real setbacks, real comebacks. Because the world needs more stories that prove it can be done. And you might be the next one we tell.